Chapter 1. Murder in a Small Town. A criminal story that chills the blood. That morning, Galina stepped into her home. Long red streaks trailed along the corridor. She entered the room and froze. On the sofa lay a body, its head reduced to a bloody pulp. Just yesterday, that body had been her husband. Soon, the operational team arrived at Engels Street. Experts determined the man had been savagely beaten in the kitchen. He hadn't died instantly. Clearly, he'd crawled unconscious through the corridor to the living room before bleeding out. In cases like this, finding the murder weapon is crucial. Fingerprints might still linger on it. An axe? No, the wounds weren't chopped. A hammer? No, something heavier. The murder weapon had no sharp edges. In professional terms, a blunt, heavy object. A frying pan? A crime of passion. The pan simply came to hand. That meant a quarrel had erupted. But with whom? No one knew then. The worst was yet to come. Detectives launched their investigation into the brutal murder on Engels Street. For this small town, it was a seismic event. In a typical year, they'd see maybe 2 or 3 serious crimes, usually domestic squabbles, nothing with this level of savage cruelty. Boris Semenov had been beaten to death in his own apartment. No signs of a break-in. He'd let the killer in himself. The lead theory came from expert criminologist Yuri Bushev. He proposed the frying pan had been wielded by a woman. Could a woman commit such barbarity? But Bushev was a seasoned, respected professional. His theory demanded serious attention. And then came a lead. Operative Ivanov left the building and found agitated neighbors surrounding the victim's wife, Galina. She was sobbing, but one man bellowed at her, "It's your fault." What did the neighbor mean by accusing Galina of her husband's death? Did his angry words hold any truth? The woman didn't hide. She admitted problems with Boris had plagued them for years. He drank too often, sparking endless scandals. But that very evening, Galina had been at a restaurant, out with loyal friends, sparing her troublesome husband. Detectives visited the restaurant and showed the waitstaff her photo. They glanced at it and confirmed confidently, "We remember her. She was here last night acting very festive." They learned that on the night of the murder, prime suspect Galina Semenova had been reveling in the restaurant. She'd ordered the same song 7 times in a row, blowing her entire wallet on music and fun. Galina partied until her money ran dry. Every patron and worker remembered her. She had an ironclad alibi. Suspicion of the husband's murder lifted from her, but the woman's hand theory lingered. Perhaps while Galina caroused at the restaurant, her husband Boris had entertained a secret female visitor. Fascinating details emerged from the neighbors. The late Boris Semenov had often been spotted with his divorced neighbor, Raisa. He'd carry her heavy bags sometimes, and just days earlier, something very strange had happened. What had the neighbor witnessed? Chapter 2. Lonely Neighbor. Imagine an ordinary day in the apartment block yard. That day, the residents gathered in the yard watched Boris Semenov return from work. From a first-floor window protruded his neighbor Raisa, wearing a seductive peignoir. Without a hint of shame, she called out, "Boris Ivanovich, could you help me sharpen a knife?" The man obediently replied, "Okay, coming right over." 20 minutes passed. Suddenly, everyone heard Raisa's furious cries, "Get out, now!" Moments later, Boris Semenov leaped from her window, shirtless. Had the man tried to force himself on his neighbor, only to face her wrath? One detective went to Raisa to get the full story. At first, she refused to talk to the police. "I've got nothing to say." But when they told her she was a murder suspect, the shocked woman spilled everything. According to her, it went like this. Lately, she'd noticed Boris Semenov, always so thrifty, hauling bags or walking his daughter to school. Yet somehow he looked unkempt, disheveled, crumpled. She pitied him. Soon, Raisa learned about his troubled marriage. His wife Galina loved scandals, and Boris endured it all for their little girl. Raisa pitied the lost soul more each day. She wanted to comfort him, but she saw he was too modest. She needed to nudge him toward bolder action. That day, she slipped into her most revealing peignoir. Still, no effect. Boris wouldn't even steal a glance at her while sharpening the knife. Then Raisa accidentally spilled juice on her guest. She offered to wash his shirt. Once Boris undressed, she suggested he rest in the bedroom, but Boris turned her down flat. "I love my wife," he said. "I have no plans to cheat on her." Raisa was stunned. His wife neglected him, showered him with scandals, and still he loved her? What a henpecked fool! The rejected woman flew into a rage and screamed at Boris. "Get out!" Badly flustered, he bolted through the open window. The detectives verified her alibi. She was clear for the time of the murder. And crucially, no fingerprints of hers anywhere in Boris Semenov's apartment. So, who was the real killer? And at that very moment, another corpse turned up in town, with its head crushed. Chapter 3. Next riddle. The small town reeled from a shocking new discovery. A second body had turned up, this one with a smashed head, found not in an apartment, but in an abandoned house. The killer's style mirrored the savagery inflicted on Boris Semenov. The face was so disfigured from the blows that morgue staff struggled to identify the victim for days. It turned out the criminologist had been wrong. This wasn't a woman's handiwork. It bore the mark of a ruthless serial killer. Detectives labored to pinpoint the victim's identity. Finally, it emerged: Sergei Kiselyov. He'd been found with his head crushed. But where to hunt for the criminal now? And what connected these two murders? No one suspected it yet. Soon, the investigation would drown in suspects. Chapter 4. Fatal Genes. That day, Dmitry Vasilyev stunned his village by strutting around in fashionable imported jeans, a rare commodity back then. But his neighbor spotted something odd. The jeans were worn and stained with poorly washed brown spots. When asked about the marks, Dmitry snapped rudely, "None of your business." The neighbor happened to be the son of the local precinct officer. He reported it straight to his father. The policeman's instincts kicked in. He phoned his city colleagues, asking about any crimes involving jeans. They perked up immediately. After all, Sergei Kiselyov's mutilated body had been found in just his underwear. The jeans might have been the killer's prize. Intrigued by the tip about bloody jeans on a village kid, detectives descended on Dmitry Vasilyev and were caught off guard. The Vasilyevs were a big family, and Dmitry was the eldest. Spotting the operatives, he welcomed them warmly into his home. They were surprised by his cheerful hospitality. To them, Dmitry seemed like a simple soul who'd never ventured beyond his village. Could this friendly guy be tangled in a bloody crime? They had to break it to him. He was a suspect. His response floored them. Dmitry stayed calm. "Yes, I killed him." He didn't deny a thing, just asked for a moment to finish his lunch. Soon, Dmitry Vasilyev sat in a holding cell, recounting every detail. How he'd eyed a guy in jeans in town, coveting the import. How he'd lured the victim to an abandoned house with the promise of a foreign belt. How he'd grabbed a heavy iron bar and, for the first time in his life, mercilessly beaten a man to death. Dmitry confessed it all with chilling calm, as if he didn't grasp he'd snuffed out a life for a pair of shabby jeans. It was a savage, absurd, nightmarish crime. But what about Boris Semenov's murder? The village killer's work too? Dmitry flatly refused to take responsibility. They soon confirmed he had an alibi for the first crime. Another killer was still out there. Chapter 5. The Musician. A new lead, or just another dead end? One of Boris Semenov's neighbors reported seeing a guest enter his apartment that fateful evening. Detectives quickly identified him, a local musician. Under interrogation, he admitted visiting Boris. "We drank a lot. I remember nothing. So if you think I killed him, then I guess I did." The musician asked for paper and penned his own confession. "I asked to punish me to the full severity of the law, but I remember nothing." A heartfelt confession from a man who remembered zilch. Just imagine. It seemed the case was cracked, but the detectives held back their celebration. A nagging doubt lingered. This musician just didn't seem capable of murder. They dug into the evidence, and right then, surprise witnesses surfaced. Who were they? Chapter 6. Valuable witnesses. Sometimes the truth emerges from the least expected places. Two girls had been hauled into the local police station for harassing men in a restaurant. They faced 15 days for disturbing the peace, and they wanted no part of it. So they offered to trade their freedom for valuable information. The detectives agreed. The girls revealed that Galina's alibi wasn't ironclad after all. She'd slipped out of the restaurant for a literal 10 minutes. No one had noticed. She headed straight home. She lived right next door. Galina Semenova was detained. They sent the dress she'd worn that night to forensics. The results came back fast. Tiny blood splatters on the fabric. The blood type matched her slain husband's. Meanwhile, the stains on the musician's pants turned out to be animal blood from somewhere else entirely. The man who'd already confessed to the brutal murder was released. The bewildered musician had been utterly convinced he was the killer. He nearly broke down in tears when he learned the investigation had cleared him. Now the detectives needed answers. Why had the woman killed her husband? Had someone helped her? Or had she acted alone? Chapter 7. Terrible Love. Two killers, one pretrial holding area, love at first sight. Galina Semenova and Dmitry Vasilyev crossed paths by chance. Thin cell walls separated them. Just a few seconds of eye contact, but enough to spark something between them. By cruel irony, right there in custody, the next chapter of their story began. And it ended in yet another murder. At first, Galina Semenova stonewalled the interrogations, denying everything. But eventually, they broke through. She gave confessional testimony, revealing the full backstory of this horrific crime. Galina had fallen out of love with her husband quickly. She craved excitement, fun. Boris was too homebound, too dull. So she started cheating. Fleeting lovers met in a friend's apartment. Her husband suspected, fretted, but he couldn't leave. He loved their little daughter too much. In his grief, he gradually turned to drink. That very evening, Boris had planned a business trip, but suddenly postponed it. Instead, he ended up in the kitchen with his musician friend, drinking. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Galina had spotted a promising cavalier. After dancing, she decided to continue the evening back at the Semenovs' apartment. She was certain her husband was away on his trip. Since the restaurant sat right next to their building, she slipped home first to check. And there he was, drunk. He started hounding her with questions and accusations of cheating. Galina snapped. She grabbed the frying pan and rained blows on his head. She only came to her senses when he stopped moving. Then she returned to the restaurant. That's when the hysterical dancing began. She emptied her wallet on music, ordering the same song 7 times in a row. Later, she still managed to tumble into bed with her lover, leading him to her friend's apartment for a passionate night. The next morning, as if nothing had happened, Galina went home. She felt indifferent to her husband's state. Alive or dead, it didn't matter. Experts later concluded Boris hadn't died instantly. With timely help, he might have survived. The killer herself called the police, hoping to dodge suspicion, but she miscalculated. Chapter 8. Sad Finale. The union of two killers. It seemed nothing could be more horrifying, but the story wasn't over. Galina Semyonova received 7 years. The court took her young child into account, yet her daughter ended up living permanently with her aunt. First, her mother was in prison. Then, after release, she simply didn't want to take the girl back. Maybe it was for the best. The child never witnessed what happened to her mother next. For all 7 years, Galina corresponded with her new love, killer Dmitry Vasilyev. The rural murderer got 8 years, so she waited an extra year after her release. They were a psychological match made in hell. It's hard to imagine these two killers deciding to start a family. But soon came a modest wedding, hopes for a romantic new life. A little son was born. Their killer's union quickly soured, stripped of any romance. They were bound not by love, but by endless binges. The husband raged most violently. One day, he seized their underage son by the legs, hoisted him over the balcony, threatened to throw him off. Galina fell to her knees, begging. The husband spared the boy, but turned immediately and nearly crushed his wife's skull. In response, she plunged a knife into him. Vasilyev died on the spot. For her second murder, they justified her, ruled it necessary self-defense, even though she'd killed a man for the second time. What did she have instead of a heart? The investigation would never find the answer. Dear friends, thanks for watching. Next time we will tell you another crime story that happened in real life. Subscribe so you don't lose us. Goodbye.